And now we have part two of an historian's point of view about conspiracies. Conspiracies are nonsense. So conspiracy theories have a lot in common with religion. Quoting Wikipedia, conspiracy theories evolve to incorporate whatever evidence exists against them, so that they become, as Barkin writes, a closed system that is unfalsifiable and therefore a matter of faith rather than proof, unquote. Just like religion. And no, I am not religious. Supernatural is not an explanation for anything, even less than conspiracy is. Let's take the example of NAFTA and overseas manufacture. Follow the money. Conspiracy theorists vastly overestimate the influence individuals or small groups can have. When manufacturing is much cheaper outside the United States owing to labor costs, what's going to happen? In the end, in order to make more money, manufacture is going to go beyond the borders. And ultimately, you're not going to make money if you don't have your manufacture outside the United States where labor is a lot cheaper. That's just the sense of money. That's not a conspiracy. It's a natural thing to happen. In science fiction and fantasy, we have the notion that there was a conspiracy that a small group of gatekeepers, such as editors of magazines, somehow controlled publishing of science fiction and fantasy for decades. This is nonsense in a free economy. It could have been done in Soviet Russia, sure, but in a free market, if people buy one kind of science fiction or fantasy, more of that will be published. If they buy less of another kind, less of that will be published. It doesn't require gatekeepers to somehow control this. Publishers want to make money. Tastes in people change. And conspiracists don't want to recognize that. They want everything to be the way it used to be. And frequently things are not the way they used to be. Hashtag Gamergate involved fundamental misunderstandings, ignorance, of how reviews and academic peer reviews work. Gamergate was a conspiracy theory in that respect, but mainly it was conservative gamers trying to impose their tastes on everyone in an often abusive manner, sometimes involving misogyny, that is to say, hatred of women. So we saw attempts to ruin careers and drive people, usually women, out of the video game industry. To quote, I think, Rob Fahey, people who actually concerned with ethics in games journalism who provided willing cover for virulent misogynists and harassers during Gamergate. But to this day, there are a lot of people who think Gamergate was about journalism. It wasn't. Now, I asked in the first part, are Eurogames a conspiracy? I mean, I might as well suggest that. Eurogames have displaced war games. Why is that? And I generally dislike Eurogames, which are often puzzles, not games. But I don't think it's a conspiracy. It's just a generation's change and taste change. And as an historian, I try to explain that rather than blame something on a conspiracy. People are now less confident and have less self-esteem and are less likely to put their ego on the line in a game. They don't want to play directly conflictual games. Eurogames tend to be ones where you play your own game, almost multiplayer solitaire, and you don't have conflicts with the other players. Of course, also, the farther in time we get from World War II, the less people are interested in history. And I have a separate screencast that discusses why war games have become far less popular in great length. But it's not because of any conspiracy. When people start talking about gatekeepers somehow controlling a flow of information, in most cases, you're already in the fog of conspiracy theories. There are almost never gatekeepers in a free market economy. In something like the Soviet economy, yes, there were. Where you have a dictatorial government that tries to control information, you can try to have gatekeepers. But that's not what the West is about. And nowadays, it's harder to do it, period, because of the internet and because of electronic communication and so on. Now I'm going to quote Tom Sorensen, who is actually a sports columnist, but a really good one. Quote, create a profile of the far-right white movement, that is to say, those who are most likely to be conspiracy theorists, And I guarantee you'll find many people whose lives are much less successful than they expected, much less successful than they believe they deserve. Somebody has to be blamed for the absence of success. Somebody else, I mean. So they blame blacks and Latinos and Jews, liberals and intellectuals and elitists, the media and the Democrats and the rich people for deliberately ruining their lives. Now, Occam's razor is a tool that conspiracy theorists never know. It's a guide, a rule of thumb, in other words, an heuristic technique, a principle for problem solving. Quoting Wikipedia, among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected, other things being equal. Put another way, unquote. Put another way, when there are two explanations that might work, choose the one that requires fewer leaps of faith. Cut away the extra complication. That's the razor. Don't burden failing explanations with ad hoc hypotheses to prevent them from being falsified. Get rid of those explanations. Use the ones with fewer and simpler hypotheses. Occam's summary of this was, entities must not be multiplied beyond necessity. But it's really older than Occam's medieval point of view. Aristotle writes in his Posterior Analytics, we may assume the superiority, other things being equal, of the demonstration which derives from fewer postulates or hypotheses. A simple way to say this would be, keep it simple, stupid. Is Trump's election a conspiracy? Here is a man with no qualification to act as president, whose personal attributes are undesirable. He's a bully, he's a misogynist, he shoots his mouth off, he doesn't seem to be able to control himself, and so on, who's crooked in business, who's been a rich man all his life and has nothing in common with ordinary people. Yet he was elected, albeit with millions fewer votes than his opponent. Sounds like a conspiracy, doesn't it? But more likely it's the result of rampant misogyny. Many people voted against Hillary Clinton because she was a woman, and too many people believing too many conspiracy theories. In sum, conspiracy theories arise from ignorance of how things really work, from fear of uncontrolled circumstances, and from unwillingness to take responsibility. Thanks for listening.